terrifying things that have happened fairly recently. Most of these stories begin sometime after I go to bed. Most take place in my bed, which I share with my 2 dogs and my wife. I'm a man in my mid-30s. I guess the best place to begin would be the first time I believe I astral projected. I was visiting a friend and enjoying a rare night without my wife and dogs. As I achieved perfect relaxation, I realized that I could push out and leave my body. I floated in the blackness and eventually came across 2 people sitting at a table outside. Although I could not understand their words, I could hear them talking. They were talking about sports, but I couldn't make out any specifics. I tried to talk to them, and I told them my name, but I don't think they could hear me. However, I believe that I may have then attracted the attention of a malevolent being of some kind. I could feel his evil once he became aware of me. I quickly returned to my body and woke up. It was barely midnight locally. Later that evening, I tried the same thing, and the evil thing was waiting for me. I couldn't sleep anymore that night. I've tried twice more to astral project since that event, but this thing found me almost immediately. I no longer attempt this, save one other time, which we will discuss later. This next story is a bit more recent. It's preceded by a previous event with an epilogue, but I don't write any notes about that one. I was sleeping and having a very realistic dream. I was aware that it was a dream and that it was important for me to be there. I was in a small comic book convention looking for Charlie Chan novels, which I have never read or attempted to read in the real world. Perhaps I should, all things considered. I was walking with a watcher who also seemed to know that I was dreaming. He told me that it was important to remember the following things once I woke up: the storm, this man, the wife, the sound, the watcher, the dream, the fear, and the defender. He told me I needed to find the answer to the question, how can Dodge just give up on the world? There is something I don't quite remember about killing one's own brother for power. I think that was related to Dodge, whoever that is. Epilogue. I woke up. It was last winter and very dark in the bedroom. Suddenly there is a red light being projected like a laser on the ceiling. It is of a spinning wheel with an animal head in the center. There are multiple boxes on the outside of the wheel. These boxes each have a symbol in them that I do not recognize. I'm scared to close my eyes. The wheel is still there, in my vision, even with my eyes closed. I sit up and it's still there, spinning slowly in front of me. It changes perspective a little, but not entirely. I decide to go up. Despite this, it stays with me until I turn the light on in the bathroom. This epilogue happens 3 more times, all basically the same. I woke up my wife once, but she didn't see anything unusual. Neither wheel went away until after I turned on the light or walked around a bit. The next event is not particularly scary, but was rather jarring. I was in bed with the lights on. My wife was reading, but I had put down my book. I had a song stuck in my head, just a random rock song I knew pretty well. Suddenly, there was this brief buzzing sound, and the song in my head was replaced by a rap song of some sort. I'm not familiar with the genre, but I didn't recognize it at all. I could not and cannot remember the song anymore. This was less than a year ago. There was a similar event in which I felt a wave of some sort push through me, with a loud buzz, and well, it felt like I had just witnessed reality rewrite itself. If you have seen the movie Yesterday, it was kind of like that. Like something huge happened, but no one noticed. The story I'll share with you is similar to the epilogue mentioned earlier. However, this one's a bit different. Rather than the wheel, there is a human-looking arm projected in a rectangle. The arm was Caucasian. Couldn't see past the upper arm. It was moving slightly, but not much. The rectangle faded away into the static, like you used to see one of those old televisions if you left them on too long. Once it was gone, the red lights returned, but this time in the shape of skulls floating across the ceiling. They faded away themselves without my need to turn on a light. I have several other stories about seeing hideous creatures. One time I think I mentally traveled into the past onto a battlefield, and one terrifying attempt of the thing trying to grab my arm from under a bed. I'm fairly certain that there's a lot more that I can't remember. I know all this sounds. I had to share it, but I'm scared about what my family and friends might think. Every word above is true. Be safe.
You are listening to the content of ParanormalM.com.
What was running upstairs? During the summers, my boyfriend and I take care of my parents' house while they're out traveling. The summer of 2017 was extremely hot here, so we slept in our basement to try to hide from the heat. My boyfriend worked as a handyman at the time and would get up at 6 in the morning. I worked the register at a store in time, so we worked very different hours. The morning in question went as one could expect. At 6 a.m., my boyfriend gave me a peck on the cheek, told me he was off to work, and left me snoozing in bed. About 2 years later, I woke up to a bang upstairs. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, groggy from sleep. I hear the unmistakable sound of bare feet running on hardwood floor. It started at the opposite end of the house and ran until it stood right over, only to run back again. Being the lazy bum I am, I texted my boyfriend from the bed. LMAO. What have you forgotten this time? Need me to come help? As I heard the footsteps run back and forth, my iPhone dinged. What? I'm at work, LOL. As I read the message, I can feel my blood turn cold as the steps stopped right above me. My first thought was that someone had broken in. I grabbed an old brandy stick my parents had stored away and started sneaking upstairs, ready to knock whoever had broken in the hell out. An empty house greeted me. I felt the door. It was as locked as it had been the night before. I stood in our sunny living room, where we had heard the steps stop. Suddenly, my improvised weapon felt very obsolete.
You are listening to the content of ParanormalM.com.
There's something in the basement. My sister had a sleepover with a friend this weekend. They were both down in the basement because of the rec room we have there. It's pretty cozy with an old Xbox, an easel for painting, some old armchairs and comics. My sister and her friend often played around there by themselves, painting, playing Minecraft, usually 13-year-old stuff. We're used to bring them being alone down there, and our old basement isn't seen as creepy or unsettling in any way. On Friday night, however, our evening got interrupted by the girls scrambling upstairs, shrieking like a couple of bats out of hell. "There's something in the basement!" my sister screamed. We figured they'd gotten spooked by a spider or something like that, so my parents went down to check. The basement was found empty. The girls were asked what all the fuss was about, and they told my parents the door handle to the basement started rattling so hard the entire door started shaking. I later asked my sister what all the yelling was about, and she showed me what happened. It was like something was trying to rip the door off, she said while grabbing the door handle and yanking on it like someone trapped. It couldn't have been a draft, as the bathroom isn't connected to any of the outside walls, nor does it have any windows. The girls were laughing and giggling like crazy from the excitement of getting spooked like that, and we left it at being weird but harmless. It did, however, remind me of something that I remember happened to me as a kid in the same basement. I must have been 8 years old. I had gotten my own key, and I was allowed to walk home on my own. I knew my parents were at work, so I unlocked the door and stepped inside. As I did, I looked at the basement door. The door had been removed now. And as I stepped inside, I saw the door handle start to rattle and the door opening. I got so scared I bolted out of the house straight over to my friend's house, bawling my eyes out the entire time. Once my parents came home and I told them what happened, they explained what a cross draft and how it's the most likely to would have caused the door to open. I believed it back then, but after this weekend, I'm not so certain.
You are listening to the content of ParanormalM.com.
Our empty house isn't as empty as we thought. Yesterday I came home from being in town to run a quick errand. I rang the doorbell since the door was locked and my boyfriend opened. "Damn, you're fast," he exclaimed. I was a little confused because I'd been gone for maybe 30 minutes, which isn't that fast, considering he let me borrow his electric bike, and I didn't pay it any mind. After he'd let me in, he yelled, "Annie, your sister's home." "Annie's still at school. It's only 11 at noon," I answered. My boyfriend looked confused. "Who's home then? Your parents don't get out of work yet, do they?" "No, they get home at like 4. "Oh, okay. What did you forget, by the way? You must have biked like a madman to get here and back that fast," he remarked. "I didn't forget anything. I don't have the keys, remember?" My boyfriend relayed that to me. After I left, he could hear someone walking around the house, doors opening and closing, and other everyday noises. It was so loud and clear, he just assumed it was my sister and me getting home. I've been telling him that there's something in the house, but he hasn't experienced it himself before now. I always find myself yelling, "Hello," to the empty rooms because it sounds like someone's walking around, closing and opening doors, and the rustling of fabric.
You are listening to the content of ParanormalM.com.
I saw what haunted my boyfriend as a child. This is a very strange, and at first I thought this belonged in a dream or night terror for him. Now I'm not sure. My boyfriend and I have been together for 9 years now. I've always suffered from night terrors. However, that's not something you bring up on a first date. This was back when my boyfriend and I had been dating for a few months, and I had recently started sleeping together. We were sleeping at his place. I woke up in the middle of the night and noticed we were holding hands. I thought it was cute, but I noticed that his hand was so pale and thin. My eyes got used to the darkness, and I saw his hands crossed on his stomach while I was holding a third, pale hand. As I became aware of this, something that looked like a woman with long black hair hanging over her face sat up from behind my boyfriend's form, looked at me, and laid back down. I stroked the hand with my thumb as you do when you're holding hands with someone. I don't know why I did that. I just wrote it off as a dream logic. This was in the beginning of our relationship, so I didn't tell him about it because I didn't want him to think I was crazy. Years passed, and now we're living together. He's very aware of my paranormal beliefs and night terrors. Out of nowhere, I came to think of that dream. "Did I ever tell you about that night terror I had at house when we recently got together?" I asked him with a little laugh. "I saw someone who looked like Sadako in your bed when we slept. I almost got jelly." I joked, but he didn't laugh. He got very pale and said, "Did you try to hold your hand?" I got taken back by his reaction. I told him I did hold her hand, and even remember stroking it with my thumb. My boyfriend then revealed to me that as a child, he'd have a recurring nightmare that a woman with long black hair and white hands tried to hold his hand. but he'd wake up in a panic before she ever got to him. He'd never told me this because he just wrote it off as a childhood nightmare. Now neither of us think they're nightmares anymore.
You are listening to the content of ParanormalM.com.
My mystery about hours and minutes. Let's say that in my life, I witnessed a couple paranormal episodes, maybe years ago, and maybe I'll ask for explanations later, but now I'm more interested in another very strange issue that has tormented me for years. Since I was 18 or 19, it happened to me many times to look at the clock and see marked, for example, at night I come home after work or after being with friends, and I don't look at the clock right away. But too often, it is 3:33. I wake up at night and go to the bathroom and drink. I look at the time, and 4 times out of 5, it is 3:33. In the afternoon, especially if I'm at work, I try not to look at the time. But punctuality, or it's 3:33 or 3:34. What connection is there to these minutes? I waited until I was 33 to ask for this. I'll definitely be teased, I don't know. But it's a coincidence too strange. Is there a link to something? Does it have any meaning in numerology?
You are listening to the content of ParanormalM.com.
Do you think ghosts like to mess with people more when they aren't recording? For example, we were doing an investigation in an old jail located in Globe, Arizona. One of the stories was that when volunteers were turning off all the breakers, sometimes they would report hearing a jail cell door slam. Long story short, one of my guys had to run out and grab some gear. He had just gotten back into town. We needed to eat before locking down for the rest of the night. When I went to turn the power off, I got to the last breaker, and after turning it off, I heard 3 loud and distinct knocks from behind me. I jumped out of my skin. I screamed out to ask if there was someone playing tricks on me. Nothing. I walked up front to the guy talking, and he didn't hear a thing. Not even me calling out to them. Or another time, I went to the bathroom at another location. At the time, a phone started ringing like an old rotary phone style. My 2 teammates and the host all heard this. The thing is, there are no phones working in the building, and everyone had their cell phone on them. None went off. The tie-in here, both times, we didn't have gear enabled to record or capture it as we were just setting up or finishing a tour. And those have been some of the most intense things we've experienced as far as what we think could have been true paranormal activity. Do you think that spirits are more willing to make themselves known when they think they aren't being recorded? Does that play into it at all? Or just happens to be a sort of coincidence?
You are listening to the content of ParanormalM.com.
A ghost in my friend's house broke the attic door and scared me to death. When I was 19, my college friend Jack asked me to take care of his house and pet due to him and his family leaving somewhere. My friend had a normal house which can fit in a normal-sized family. It was Sunday. I had nothing to do, so I wanted to help him be a responsible guy. They all left the house around 7 p.m. I began watching some love movies and other things that were displayed on TV by that time. 5 hours later, the dog started barking, so I thought he wanted to go outside or eat something. I filled his bowl with dog food when Jack left for me, but he was barking and even shaking. I opened the door to the yard and he immediately ran from the house. I guess that he just needed to go do dog things. Well, he wasn't outside for the past 5 hours. I kept watching whatever showed up on the TV. I kind of wanted to sleep, but I couldn't do it for obvious reasons. 2 hours later, I ran to the yard door to let the dog in. I felt bad that he was there the whole time. I forgot about him. He was sleeping under a small tree like nothing. I took the dog inside by force when he suddenly started barking and shaking so hard that he got out of my arms, ran to the backyard when he became peaceful. Later on, the attic door shut with a huge force that I thought they totally broke it, and I'm in trouble for ruining the house. But after a second, I realized who could have done that. I went upstairs just to see broken doors, which were barely holding up. I was about to come down when they started to close and open itself really fast that I froze. The noise was so loud that the dog started barking even louder from the outside. I ran downstairs to the yard door, opened them as fast as I could, ran outside, and hid in the bushes. The dog was still barking for a good 5 minutes. I managed to smoke 3 cigarettes in that bush. I spent the rest of the night outside without any jacket, just a sweater and a dog. When Jack came home around 8 a.m., I showed him what happened last night, knowing that I'm in huge trouble for not fulfilling my duty. He reacted without anger or anything. He looked more worried than angry when I told him what happened. Finally, he experienced that his uncle died and they were going to another state for the funeral. The house was built by him for years before. I guess he just wanted to say goodbye to his old place. I also realized that the dog wanted to warn me as he felt bad energy in that house.
You are listening to the content of ParanormalM.com.
A poltergeist that hated blondes. My story started in 1982. My dad had been in the military for 32 years, and then had worked for NASA before he retired. Because of his military service, he and my mom were eligible to travel anywhere in the world by military transport, if there was available room, and pay a nominal fee for meals while in flight. They had never been to Hong Kong, and it had been long been on their bucket list. They arranged for the trip, which would have been about 2 weeks if I remember correctly. They were worried about leaving their house empty for that long and asked me to house sit. There had been a string of burglaries in the area, but they targeted houses that were all sale or empty. Now, the house I grew up in was not a very cozy or warm or fuzzy place. The rumor that I heard when we moved in was that a boy of 13 had killed himself with a shotgun a couple of years prior to us moving in. I had never been able to substantiate the rumor, and it was definitely verboten in my house to ask about it. It was a standard ranch in the burbs, built in probably 1968 or 1969, when California started booming. My parents got a suspiciously good deal on it, but I digress. This house just did not feel friendly. Even with all the windows and doors open, it felt dark. When you entered the front door, you had a kitchen and a family to your right, living room to the left, and a long hallway leading back to 4 bedrooms and 2 baths. Classic L shape with the tiled roof and the pseudo-Halencia. The energy made me nervous. Quite often at night, you would hear footsteps going down the hall turning and going to the kitchen. There was a built-in desk where we kept a phone or an answering machine and a fax machine. Without fail, we could hear the fax machine dialing and the phone speaker would pick up ringing. No one ever answered, thank God. My dad was an ex-search and rescue man. He quickly shut down any discussion. If you grew up military, you understand that one look would wilt you in your seat. They left for their trip, and I nervously settled in. I had the instinct to keep myself near the front of the house. I chose the family room couch in order to stay as close to the front door as possible. Things have a habit of pretty much saying, I see you. And I have to say, I see you too, which can lead to a pretty nasty standoff. The first night there, I stayed up late and finally went to sleep at about 2 a.m. At 3 o'clock, right before the dot. I know the cliche. The little entity came walking down the hall, step, shuffle, step, all the way into the kitchen. I waited for it to start dialing. Nope, it paused, and the footsteps came right up to where it was lying on the couch. was feeling an energy surge, but I didn't see anything. My impression was that it was agitated. In my head, I heard, "Move." I was trying to wake up and pull myself together when it said again, "Move." More urgent, and I sat up and started putting my shoes on. There was a kitchen between me and the front door. I was flabbergasted that this thing and I had even been afraid of was more scared than I was. I was shaking and fumbling for my car keys. This thing was screaming in my head, "Move, please, go. Please go now." And I bolted for the kitchen. As I got to the edge of the dining room, I heard what this ghost was afraid of. It sounded huge. Heavy footsteps boomed down the hall. Something growled, and I heard the farthest bedroom door slam. Then the next one. Then the next one. Only one doorway left before it got to the kitchen. I grabbed the front doorknob, frantically tried to get it open, but it wouldn't budge. It was unlocked, but there was so much pressure that I couldn't pull it open. The last door slammed, and I prayed for help to get it open. It suddenly popped open so hard that I fell backwards into the wall and scrambled outside onto my hands and knees. Behind me, the front door slammed so hard that the wood frame splintered in an area about 3 inches across. I sat in the car until dawn. I never again went into that house at night. I took a friend back with me to check it before dark every night. My parents sold it to my sister when they downsized, but I never went over there again. Years later, I sold this story to a friend of mine, Nick, who had spent time with me over there when we were in high school. His comment? "That poltergeist that hates blondes?" Yes, Nick had felt it too. We're both blondes. It had trapped him in the kitchen one day. I wondered why he had suddenly stopped coming over.
You are listening to the content of ParanormalM.com.
Golden Gate Bridge Ghost. This encounter happened about 1982. That's quite a while ago, but it's stuck in my memory as one of the first encounters I've had with a spirit. Luckily, they seemed to appear as normal people to me. So, at the time, I'm not especially frightened. The place was under the North Pier of the Golden Gate Bridge. There's a parking lot and an incline that leads down under the North Tower. It's surrounded by granite blocks that are huge, probably 10 feet wide and 8 feet tall. They were cut as supports for the bridge as it was being built. They were never removed. When you're in your early 20s, it's a romantic place to walk. There's a very small lighthouse called the Fort Point Light that was decommissioned when the bridge was built, and as you can sit there and watch the fog roll down over the city, hear the foghorn blast from under the South Tower. I was dating a man who lived in San Francisco, and we were young and broke, so we went to the Ghirardelli chocolates, and then went for a walk under the North Tower to spend a little time alone, enjoy the sunset. It was almost sunset as we parked and walked down to the lighthouse. We sat on this little jetty next to it and talked until it was full dark, probably about 8:30. It was either September or October. I don't know if you've been to San Francisco, but it gets very windy and cold as the sun goes down. We had only light jackets on. We decided to go back up to the car, head to the little coffee shop, 18th Avenue, to warm up. As we got closer to the granite blocks, I noticed a man in a red flannel shirt and what looked like wool pants and work boots, sitting on top of a block, smoking a pipe. What sticks in my mind is the glow from his pipe and the smell of the tobacco that carried on the breeze. I nodded to him and said, "Hello." We were walking within about 5 feet of where he was sitting, and he said, "Hello, fine evening, isn't it?" I asked him if he needed a ride anywhere because the parking lot was empty, except for our car, and he answered very politely that he was waiting for his wife and daughter, but thank you. I asked if they were driving to meet him, and he laughed and said, "Oh no, He'd been there for quite a while, but he would see them walk up. Odd. At about this time, it registered on me that my date was jiggling. Literally, he was hopping from one foot to another like he was in a windstorm, and he was tugging frantically on my jacket sleeve. He grabbed my elbow and pushed me in front of him to the parking lot, shoved me into the car. I was pretty irritated, couldn't figure out why his freaking problem was. It was bad enough that he hadn't said a word to a nice man, but he hadn't even let me say goodbye as we left. I turned to yell at him as he backed out and peeled out of the parking lot as fast as he could, but I was stopped by how pale he was. He looked as if he was about to cry. He didn't say a word until we got off the bridge and then started yelling. "Who were you talking to?" It turns out he didn't see the man. He didn't hear him either. He only smelled pipe smoke and saw me talking to a granite block. He said he felt freezing air and was afraid that if we didn't leave, something horrible was going to happen. He was afraid we'd disappear, were his exact words. Then I was a little freaked out and started doing some research on who this man might be. The Golden Gate Bridge was completed in 1938 and several workers were killed while building it. My guess is that he was one of the men who died during the construction and his spirit was tied to the place. As for waiting for his wife and daughter, maybe they still lived in San Francisco and he was waiting for them to pass. He would cross over at the same time. Doesn't sound like a bad place to wait to me. I never saw my date again after that night, but who can blame him? I was talking to a spirit. That would be enough for anyone to decide to find a girlfriend who didn't talk to people who weren't there. I've had a lot of encounters since then, but I'm grateful that he was sweet and polite. It taught me to stop and remember that mostly they're just people and not purposely trying to frighten you.
You are listening to the content of ParanormalM.com.
Someone under the covers with me. We live in Texas City, and it's the site of a massive industrial accident that happened in 1947 that killed at least 576 people. The whole town was damaged, and one ship's anchor was blown 1.5 miles. The other landed at the base of the Texas City dike. That's about 4 blocks from my house. Most people were killed in offices, schools, neighborhoods, and the entire blocks from my house. Because of this, we've experienced what I think as people passing through. My theory is that my house, which is one of the few old ones remaining, is familiar to them. They never seem to mean any harm. There is also the earliest Air Force base in the nation here, and my house was right on the boundary line where the base housing was. That might explain all the energy that seems to still come through from time to time. I fell off a ladder 12 years ago and fractured my pelvis and 2 vertebrae. When it really hurts, it helps to grab a comforter and sleep on the living room floor. Puts everything back into alignment, if that makes sense. One night last winter, I'd slept on the floor, but woke up right as our antique mantel clock was chiming 4 a.m. I was lying on my side facing the TV, and the bedrooms and hallways were to my back. I heard footsteps and assumed that my husband woke up and came to check on me. I was sleepy and felt him lift the comforter behind me, climb underneath the covers and spoon me. Well, I thought he was being sweet and slightly romantic to keep me company. I Love Lucy was on, and I can tell you the episode. It was the one where Lucy meets Bill Holden. I'm quite sure that I was awake. I was looking at the clock the whole time. After a few minutes of spooning, I started thinking, gosh, his arm is so heavy, and I'm so hot. He was really throwing off some heat even though the room was cold. A gradual dawning happened on me that I hear snoring coming from the bedroom. My husband's distinctive snoring whistle. Who had their arm around me? I was too terrified to look. The arm around me was getting heavier and heavier, and I was panicking. In my mind, I decided to count to 3 and then jump and run for the bedroom. I counted it down and threw the comforter back and ran. I shook my husband awake, made him go and check the living room with me. There was no one there, but the comforter was rumpled as if someone had laid there, and the pillows showed indents for myself and whoever or whatever had been there. I still sleep in the living room once in a while, but I always sleep very close to the coffee table, where no one could possibly lay down behind me. Before I go to sleep, I say a little prayer that no one visits, and I ask out loud, "Please, I just want to sleep. Don't get too close or touch me." So far, so good. I know they mean no harm, but we already hear a group of people at 3 a.m., and a ghost dog bumps our bed pretty frequently. I love my house. I just don't want to be scared to death in it.
You are listening to the content of ParanormalM.com.
Ghost Children from Texas City Explosion. Let me preface my story by telling you that I live in a town right on the Galveston Bay in South Texas. It's a quiet town where you would never guess that anything dark had ever happened. Nevertheless, in 1947, a ship named Grand Camp exploded at the pier and ignited one of the largest tragedies in the United States. And all 576 people were killed, and the southern part of the town was almost vaporized. The destruction runs to within half of a mile of my 1920 bungalow, which I bought in 2010. I didn't know at the time, but there are frequent echoes of the people who lived here in 1947. One night when we were in bed, my husband was awoken at 4:30 a.m. by the sounds of 2 little girls playing with what sounded like a ball and jacks. He listened for a minute as they giggled and played by the bedroom door. He said they sounded somewhere between 6 and 8 years old. He was fully awake and facing our bedroom windows. There was enough light that he was seeing the false dawn along a slight glow behind him. I was on the side of the bed closest to the door and asleep. After a moment or two, the oldest girl said, "Watch this," to the other child. She called out, "Mama, Mama," which any mother knows will rouse you out of the deepest sleep. I immediately sat up in panic saying, What, are you okay?" And they giggled to see that I responded. My husband silently grabbed my arm and pointed to the foot of the bed. There is a patch of doorway that looked lighter and wavy to me, and I could hear a little whisper, but I couldn't make out what was being said. I looked at him. He looked at me, wide-eyed. We both decided to be massive chickens and lie down again and pretend that it never happened. That was a little creepy. We weren't sure how to deal with ghost children. Everything was quiet for about 10 minutes. I started drifting back off to sleep. My husband settled back down with his back to the door and started to doze off again. We heard the little game start up again, and a silvery glow was at the foot of the bed. I watched as it came around to my husband's side of the bed. He was lying on his side, and the little glow moved to where his pillow was. I was too afraid to move or say anything. He had his eyes squeezed shut. I don't blame him. As I watched, I looked as if 2 little hands pressed down on the bed next to his face, and the glow hovered closer and closer to his face. I'm not sure who screamed first, but we both did. There was a tinkling little laugh. It wasn't mean. It reminded me of a small child who are checking to see if they can wake you up, play with them. As we grabbed each other, thoroughly shaken, the little glow slipped right through the wall and vanished. I don't mind that the little girl and others came through once in a while, but it can surprise and shake you. We have a few stories if anyone's interested. I'd be happy to share them with you.
You are listening to the content of ParanormalM.com.
Ask Reddit 1. Driving home from dinner with my ex-wife, we took an off-road path on accident because I made a wrong turn. Figured I'd keep going because we were heading east and that was our destination anyway. Creepy dark road with some cornfields on the sides. Suddenly my ex-wife says, "What's that?" Me. "What?" Her. "They're up ahead on the side of the road. Is that a person?" Now I have a perfectly fine eye. So did she. But I didn't see a damn thing. "I don't see anything." At this point, she turns to me looking angry and says, "Stop fucking with me. Look." "I don't see anything." She looked at me confused, horrified. I've never seen her before. And then looks back at the figure and says, "What the fuck? It's a man with a briefcase and a hat." Now I got a bit worried, since the look on her face was way too genuine, spooked to be a stupid prank. So we got closer, and I still don't see a thing, and she turned quiet. As her head started to turn, we came up to this man I did not see. So I stick my neck out and turned on and off the bigger lights in the car to see what the hell she was seeing. Nothing. I see absolutely nothing but corn and a road. So we pass by this man. She turns white and starts whimpering, and she basically begs me, "Please tell me you saw that." I'm freaking out. "Please, please." Again, I tell her, "Calm down. I really don't see anything. What is wrong with you?" I then peek next to her and view my mirror, and I don't know how or why or whatever. But there he was. For just half a second, I saw a man standing at the side of the road, all in black, and a hat on. I couldn't see the briefcase, but I'm 100% sure I saw him standing there, looking at me through the mirror, as he went out of the mirror's reflection. So I froze for a second, quickly looked out the back window. Nothing. My ex-wife knew what I saw it too. "Oh my God, you just saw it." "I told you I saw it. Please drive. Go, go." We went home, and I haven't stopped thinking about that day ever. I'm not religious, and I don't believe in the paranormal or superstitious stuff. But for that life of me, I cannot explain how my ex-wife saw this person for a good 20 seconds, and I did not until I passed by and saw his reflection in the mirror while he was illuminated from my taillights. We spoke about it when we got home and tried finding explanations, but really we never understood why a man in a black suit, a black hat, black briefcase was doing on a dark, lonely road like that. 3 degrees centigrade on December night at 22:30.
You are listening to the content of ParanormalM.com.
Ask Reddit 2. Truck driver in the U.S. I just started trucking, and it had been at it for only a few months. I was with this company that makes you ride teams for the first 6 months. The guy then teamed me with isn't a bad guy, but like everyone, there's always something that you don't like about other people. These things aren't horrible, but little things. Well, we were at a shipper one day at a slaughterhouse. The smell. I don't see how the employees manage it. We get hooked up to our trailer, and I had to get my paperwork. Leave only to find out, thankfully before I left, that the seal number was different than what was on the papers. I go back in to correct this mistake, and as I walk in there is another trucker following me in. While I wait on my paperwork again, this guy and I strike up a conversation. In the middle of the convo, or rather toward the end, I happen to mention my mild frustrations about my partner. I wanted to paint a picture of this guy real quick. 6 foot, not fat, but has a bit of a trucker's pudge going on, and around 50 years on him. His arms, I didn't really notice at first, had hundreds of small, inch-long cut scars, all different directions, all over what I could see on his arms. He wore a short-sleeved shirt. He also had some of these small scars on his neck around the collar of his shirt, but not so many. Bit of a wild look in his eye. Anyways, back to the story. In hearing my frustrations, this man proceeded to tell me that I have to let it go. I said, yeah. It isn't really a big deal, so I don't think about it. And that guy just let the demons out. He gestures a fist and drags it across his gut as if he were holding a knife and cutting himself with it. You gotta let the demons out and let the fall and walk away. Gesturing every word he's saying, the man then proceeded to pull his shirt up, and I now witnessed the same scarring from his arm and his stomach, all over, hundreds. What got me the most was the really big one, right in line with where he dragged his fist. I was in shock realizing the situation. This man has done this to himself and is probably speaking literally. As my brain is racing, all I think is that I need to be gone from here. So I nod my head in agreement, because I don't know what he would do if I didn't, and promptly ask for my paperwork with a staunch voice. Nothing came of it, but the man is seriously disturbed and I think needs professional help. I hope he got it. It was the first and only time I've ever genuinely feared for my life interacting with another individual on a face-to-face basis.
You are listening to the content of ParanormalM.com.
Ask Reddit 3. I live in the northern end of Germany's Black Forest, and even though the region is nothing in comparison to US rural areas or even rural German areas, it still has its quiet and dark roads. So I'm at school event and went on until late at night. You could call it a prom sort of thing. And I take the bus to my village at 1:36 a.m. in the town where my school is. The bus ride takes about 30 minutes, and we're a good 20 minutes into the ride. Aside from me, the driver and one guy who was almost asleep in the bus is empty. As the roads we're driving on, it's the forest stretch right before my village, and it's pitch black, nothing to see. The bus comes around a corner, and in the middle of the road is a vehicle, a gray Audi A3, with hazards on, and both front doors open. The bus driver brakes hardly, comes to a stop right behind the car. Nothing to see, nothing to hear, just the engines running. The bus driver turns around in his seat and opens his mouth to speak when suddenly this woman comes out of the woods. Running toward the bus doors, bus driver, sleepy or now awake guy, and I just watch as she starts to hammer against the bus doors, screaming like some kind of animal. Bus driver slams into reverse and then drives away, almost slamming the driver door of the car. We speed through the forest, and at the first stop in civilization, he phones the police and some of his colleagues to inform them. I still don't know what the hell was going on there, but I've heard from friends, and they've seen similar things, gray Audi with hazards on, in various parts of the country they live in. It still creeps me out, and I normally take to the bus earlier than midnight, or sleep over when I'm out.
You are listening to the content of ParanormalM.com.
Ask Reddit 4. I'm not a trucker, but my father was. I became a diesel mechanic, kind of following his footsteps. When I was about 6 years old, my father picked me up to do a haul of some chemicals down to a specific plant in New York. We picked up the load and headed out, but took a different route than usual. We passed our usual right-hand turn and proceeded a few more miles up the road. We came to an intersection that is a Y in reverse, and we were to take a right-hand turn. There was a restaurant across from us on the left as we turned right and pulled over. My father told me to get out, kick the tires, take care of business, which means to take a leak. So after doing my business between the dualies, I kicked the tires to check for flats, as usual. As I turn around to my right, to the front of the truck, my father was pulling something large out of the cab. It looked heavy. It was long. I asked him what it was, and he said, "It's just trash." "Mind your business and get in the truck," he said. I hopped in the cab and half-ass watched my old man as he hauled this thing into the cornfield. He got back into the truck, and we took off, and that was it. In 1991, I heard about the body of a young girl that was found right there in that area that dated back to around the same time me and my old man used to run together. All these years, I can't help but wonder if that was what my old man pulled out of the cab of that truck. It's been 20 years now. It still haunts me.
You are listening to the content of ParanormalM.com.
Ask Reddit 5. I might be a little too late for anyone to see this, but about my third year into my career, I was taking a load of paper from Alabama to Ohio. Well, the paper mill I loaded at was in the middle of a BFE and was probably 65 miles away from the nearest interstate. I was a little low on my legal driving hours, so I figured I would spend the night at the shipper. Well, the shipper doesn't allow overnight parking. Great. So I get loaded and roll out. I set my GPS for the nearest truck stop, which was 70 miles. There was one closer, but it didn't have showers according to Google reviews. So I'm rolling along this windy country road, just taking my time because it's dark. I flip my high beams on. When I get to a straight section of road, I can see a figure walking. I remember thinking how brave they must be. Well, as I get closer, I notice the figure is a man in an all-white suit. As my lights uncover more of him, I notice he has a bag slung over his shoulder. Not a big one, but big enough to notice. As I started to ease the truck over to the left side of the road to pass him, he turned and stuck his thumb out as if to hitch a ride. Now, I normally wouldn't have a problem with that, except the fact that when he turned toward the truck, the place where his face was supposed to be was completely red and blank. No eyes, no nose, no mouth, blank, red, and blank. I must have hit my door lock button about 30 times. I made it to the truck stop and waited until daylight to take my shower. I don't know what I saw that night, but whatever it was, it cannot ride with me.
You are listening to the content of ParanormalM.com.
Ask Reddit 6. Just before the Desert Storm invasion in Kuwait, I was living in South Wales. Me and my then girlfriend were doing hitchhiking up a mountain called Penwy Fa, or Sugarloaf, in the Brecon Beacons mountain ridge. The Brecon Beacons are regularly used for military exercises, and with the Gulf War, hotting up training there was becoming more common. It was a rare, lovely day, and we're 3/4 of the way up the summit, and the valley below was hobbit-like idyllic. Bright green fields, woods, cottages, farmhouses, rural roads, bridges over the river, and the valley floor. All of a sudden, there is a noise that I've never heard before or since. A sudden explosive roar that shook the innards. Like thunder, but suddenly with no rumble. Ab-tearing noise, like some vast canvas getting ripped asunder, only louder than you can imagine. It scared the shit out of both of us, and at first I thought the mountaintop was falling on us. Somehow. But it took only a second or two to realize it was the sound of a very closer-by jet. I was looking up at the sky for the plane, now that my fear had subsided, and could not see where the fuck the thing was. Then my girlfriend tapped me on the shoulder, pointed down to the valley below, where the USAF A-10 Warthog was tearing the fuck down the valley, only 100 or so feet, the ground, practicing a strafing run, though obviously not firing anything. We sat there and could see the pilot and everything as he pulled up and flew and around and started another episode and runs from one end to the other valley. The plane was a fucking beast. I really never want to be on the receiving end of that thing. It was weird looking down on a jet. It made you feel a bit godlike. In normal times, this sort of exercise would have been strictly forbidden and confined to the big military ranges in the Brecon Beacons. But with the Desert Storm operation only a few days away and military preparations going into overdrive, these rules were obviously relaxed or just ignored.
You are listening to the content of paranormalm.com.
Ask Reddit 7. The weirdest one I saw was on my way back from a show down in Virginia to Buffalo, New York. I had 4 guys with me in a truck full of speaker equipment. I was driving in Pennsylvania on the crazy 219-322-80 route, probably near Dubois or Clearfield. If you don't know the route, it's highways mixed with local country roads, but roads you're driving 65 on, and still in the middle of nowhere. It was late, maybe midnight or 1 a.m. It was just me and another guy in the back seat. We were awake. I was driving with a house on my right, woods on my left, in the middle of a heavily wooded area. There's no street lights, so it was pitch black except for my headlights. I saw this enormous figure swoop over the car, about 10 feet up. I caught enough of it in the headlights that it looked like a bat had brown hairy body, but the wings and the size were massive. Not like a bird, but like a giant bat or flying dog. If the dog was a mastiff or a short-haired dog, and the eyes were red, I saw it and my brain registered it, and I looked around and couldn't see anymore because I was going fast enough. As I looked around, I hear my cousin's voice really calmly from the back say, "I saw it too." I just got a chill, kept driving, but we didn't say anything more until we got home. One of my friends later told me that it was probably the Mothman, and I'd have to say that that could be probably the closest thing. I saw something that wasn't a bird. My cousin saw it too. So now when I drive through the no man's land of Pennsylvania, keep an eye out for whatever the hell that thing was.
You are listening to the content of paranormalm.com.
Ask Reddit 8. My friend and I were driving from Maine to Las Vegas. At a rest stop late at night, empty aside from a beat-up dark truck with a blue tarp covering the back, I went in to use the bathroom. Only person in a large men's bathroom. I used the private stall in the very back. There were 5 or 6. I hear the bathroom door swing open as I'm taking a leak. Heavy boots walk inside ponderously. They stop outside the door to my stall, to which I raise an eyebrow, and I remember seeing large black boots under the door. He tries the door, which is bizarre because it's the only one closed in the bathroom. "Someone's in here," I say. He tries the door again, this time aggressively, as if trying to somehow wrench it open. Sometimes you don't swing the lock all the way and it can still come open. I raise my voice. "Look, man, I'm in here." At this point, I'm struck by an overwhelming sense of dread. I get goosebumps and feel that sensation that you get when you're being watched, but you don't know who or what is watching you. I don't scare easily, but I was extremely scared looking at those boots and wondering what would happen next. Then the man walks away, kind of fast, and for some reason, I get the sense that I just screwed up his plan, whatever it was. The bathroom door swings closed. When I get back to my friend's car, his huge Great Dane is growling like mad, and my friend looks freaked out. I tell him, "You won't believe what I just..." But he cuts me off. "Did you see that, man?" Puzzled, I shake my head. "No." My friend says, "Czar started barking like crazy as soon as that man left his truck and went to the bathroom, as if he was following you. Czar started freaking out and trying to hop out of the window. He wanted to get under that blue tarp covering the truck bed. The guy came out in quite a hurry and sped off. I was just about to run in and check on you." He looked at me very seriously. "Czar never barks like that. Ever." I've always remembered the sensation and absolute dread in the blue tarp over the truck. To this day, I wonder what may have been under it.
You are listening to the content of paranormalm.com.
Ask Reddit 9. I stayed the night at my friend's house, a small 1-story, 3-bedroom house in the boonies near the city limits, a few years back. I was around 18 at the time. My friend, He has 2 cats, but they hardly ever around. Anyway, we were hanging out in his living room, and it was 12, and he was tired, so I went to pass out in his room, and I stayed in the living room to sleep on the couch. I slept curled up on the couch facing the whole room. I woke up to something jab me in the stomach hard and nearly knocked the wind out of me. The cats were immediately at the corner of the rooms hissing at me. Their eyes followed something out of the room I couldn't see. Another time, I woke up at my mother's house. Funny enough, it was in her living room as well. She had kid toys for the nephews when they came over. Then they woke up because 2 of them were going off and nothing was there to set them off. I ran out of the room so fast it was ridiculous. But I thought I was over-exaggerating, so I didn't run all the way into my mom's room, just waited in the hallway. Anyways, I ended up bringing myself to go back to sleep. Nothing happened until I was almost asleep, and I opened my eyes, and I could swear one of the toys moved closer to me. I pulled the blanket over my head and eventually passed out, terrified of course. These stories could probably be debunked fairly easy, but there are only a couple of the many odd experiences life has brought me. I'd love to hear your guys' stories. Kudos for the creatures other than big toes.
You are listening to the content of ParanormalM.com.
Ask Reddit 10. For me, this was in the form of something completely out of my comfort zone. I tend to sometimes go to Google Images to look up things I remember vaguely and want to reminisce on. Like when you search up an old meme and some of the top results are from the stupid me.me site. For this time around, I was thinking about seeing ironic creepypasta memes. I used to look up something like creepypasta joke. I found what I was looking for, kinda, like a meme with spaghetti in the shape of Slender. But when I scrolled more, I found something that sort of frightened me, but also made me question what I was actually looking at. The first image of this in my search was a frozen food aisle of a grocery store, where all the meat on the shelves, in plastic. Except what I saw wasn't ordinary meat. The meat had almost full human facial features on it. Eyes and sockets, a little bit of nose, I think, and a mouth, most notably. Now you can tell why I was questioning just what the heck I was looking at. It was sort of one of those things where you just can't stop questioning it. I ended up just peering through small images of the first one I had encountered, seeing a couple rows and angles of meat with faces on them. And I even think I remember seeing some of these images distinctively showing regular-looking shoppers going by these sections, like if this was just a normal grocery store. I never looked back since then, or even tried searching it up to know if it was seeing something real or just insane Photoshop. That was until soon later, when I noticed a recommended video on my YouTube show up. The thumbnail is the thing that really creeped me out. It was the video of things to never Google, and that damn thumbnail had a face photoshopped on some meat. I didn't think of it as some sort of heavy realization, just still a moment to process. If everything I saw in those images was completely real. I also have a couple more encounters with creepy unexpected images in Google searches. I've searched so many things that it's hard to keep track of remembering what searches led to what thing, but I definitely remember a few crazy ones. This one I saw of a kid sitting on the lap of a guy in an Easter bunny costume. Sounds innocent enough on text, except for the fucking image itself. It was like a photo with Santa, mainly with a crying child, but the reason that the kid crying wasn't ominous. The damn Easter bunny guy had this crazy scary mask. It was like a quality movie mask where it looked like it moved with the wearer's face. The guy had a monstrous expression for the photo, making a wide open mouth with sharp teeth showing some cunning eyes. This dude looked freaking terrifying. I felt bad for the kid in the photo, but also noticed that the kind of image goes into my Google activity. Had to be removed from the history because it creeped me out. That much is for sure. I also ominously stumbled across a mostly unrelated image in a search of what I assumed was a pixel kind of blur to it. The position of the guy was sitting on the floor and laid back against a wall. I also remember the wall being blue and the guy's head a bit bloodied. I wasn't unsure if I was looking at a dead man, but I didn't want to have a speculation for too long, so I stopped having it bother me. These kinds of things, to me, seem like a TLMT experience that people get from regular Google search images at least once or twice in their timeline, but never think of bringing it up. I tried asking about the faces on Meet before for a Reddit post of telling me how I stumbled upon it, and then following up with questions for anyone that would know, but ended up with no help. Still kind of curious to know what exactly it is I found back then, and what kind of actual Google search term leads to that.
You are listening to the content of ParanormalM.com.
Ask Reddit 11. A couple of years ago, the drain in my garden was blocked. We kept a ladle next to it after my dad used it to clear out the drain, and after that, we didn't particularly fancy using it for cooking. Mom came home late from work one night and thanked me for getting around to cleaning the drain. Only problem was I hadn't, yet the ladle had been used and there was a load of gunk laying next to it. We're the middle of a 5-terrace block, so for anyone to get into the garden, it requires hopping over a few fences. The drain is also on the side between the conservatory and the fence, so not really a thing you randomly stumble across fence hopping. I asked my neighbor if he or she saw someone who cleared it. We get on super well, so would have been thankful if that was the situation, but she had no knowledge of it. This happened a couple years ago as well. In the conservatory, we have battery-activated birds that tweet if someone causes a big vibration, clapping hands loudly next to it, jumping up and down next to it, etc. There's not a sensitive or never go off by themselves, apart from one night where they went off 4 times over the space of a few hours. My mom and I were in bed and the cats were up with me, so none of us could have caused this. There was no weird seismic activity going on, I checked, and it's never happened before or after. Batteries are still going strong, so it wasn't that either. 3. In my room, I have a letter F. That is a battery operated and lights up. Last year I lost my keys a week or so before the incident. Didn't have a clue where they were. Went to bed as usual. Woke up at 5 a.m. with the F light on and my keys were underneath. I haven't had a history of sleepwalking, and like the above, nothing similar has happened before or after. It's still the same battery and works just fine. 4. Mom was on a holiday September. I was at work, got a parcel, and the delivery company sent me an email saying that it was in a safe place, the porch. I came home from work, parcel wasn't there. Went inside and it was sitting by the stairs. Only rational thing I can attribute to is I didn't think the door was properly closed, and after taking the picture of the delivery man, decided to plonk it inside. I've never not closed the door properly before or after. 5. Left this one off my previous list, as I'd sort of brushed it off. This happened about a week ago. I was on my bed playing online poker. Not very well, I might add, in a room with a window open, but a blackout blind pulled down in front of it, and my door closed. I have a bookcase which lays against the wall, and with this it's sideways to the window, so it's not great for blowing things off. I have a thick, heavy book on poker. As I was playing my losing streak, it fell off of the bookshelf. I have a ton of non-poker stuff on the bookshelf. That was the only book that had moved. Rationally, there was somewhere a breeze or vibration that caused it to jump off, but that was weird. I've also got a couple of bump in the night things. This one was about 6 years ago. I was playing on the PlayStation when I heard someone scraping against my door. Presumably it was my mom trying to scare me, told her to go away. She called up from downstairs asking if that was me. This was maybe 6 months ago. I was downstairs making midnight toast when something thudded twice against the door, between the living room and the dining room kitchen. Presumably it was my cat trying to get in. The sound was something like throwing itself against the door. I went to the door and there was no cat there. Raced upstairs, and both cats are sound asleep in the corner of the room. Logically, it was one of them, and races up and settled for the night. But that was speedy as heck if it was completely out of character. I've mentioned these before, but they always stop believing me when I mention about the delivery appearing inside. I genuinely promise the above have all genuinely happened, but it would be nice to think that it's a cool entity doing random tasks and helping me out. I'm sure there's a rational explanation for the above, although quite frankly, I'm worried about the rational one for the drain. If anyone has any ideas, let me know.
You are listening to the content of ParanormalM.com.
Ask Reddit 12. This is from the time I was 13. I remember it clearly because it happened the day I found my cat. That day I returned home kind of early from school because I used to return walking, but that day I took the bus, so no one was at home an hour to accept me. I was eating something before taking a nap and the phone started ringing. I answered the call, but there wasn't any sound on the other side. I hung up and was about to go when it started ringing again. I answered, and nothing, so I hung up again. It happened many times in a period of 20 to 25 minutes. The phone started ringing for the 10th time, I think. And I was angry at this point because I thought someone was making a prank. But no, this time when I answered, there was someone. And that someone was crying, and in the background there was a very creepy and, believe me, inhuman laugh. It sounded metallic. Just after I asked, "How can I help you?" I heard that the person who was crying started to shout something that wasn't in my language. Then it stopped. Then I heard the loud laughing come closer to the point where it super scared me and I hung up the phone in shock. It was a minute later I realized that maybe I had witnessed a crime or something similar. So I started checking the call record to tell the police what number was the one calling. It was empty, no calls. I was astonished. Then I called the police and informed about it. They called me hours later, very angry, telling me that they had contacted the phone company. And there wasn't any call to my phone at that hour that I had pointed out things had happened. Until today, I don't know what the hell happened. Like I'm trying to seek an explanation for this.
You are listening to the content of ParanormalM.com.
Ask Reddit 13. I often have trouble sleeping. It gets to the point where sometimes I go walking my dogs until 2 or 3 in the morning and come home to go back to sleep. I'm convinced that there's some sort of strange creature living in my quiet country Australian town. So anyways, when I go to the sports grounds in my town, I usually let my dogs off the leash so they can have a run around free. They're violent to other dogs, so it's good to let them out and run around like that. One night, I get to the sports grounds and let off my dogs and shone the torch around town to see if anyone was around. I looked round and all of a sudden I saw 2 eyes illuminated by torch staring back at me in the middle of the oval. This didn't happen at the oval pictured. It's just showing you what the footy oval is. At first, I thought it was a dog, a cat, a rabbit, a possum, but then it stood up. Whatever it was big. I thought maybe it was a kangaroo, but it stood way higher than any kangaroo I'd ever seen. Even red. I couldn't really make out its body because it's pretty far away. Like I said before, my dogs are mean and violent to other animals. They've been known to take on animals way bigger than themselves, like cows or horses. But whatever this thing was, they backed away and whimpered. I took them away on a leash and kept walking. We went through a gate, and halfway across the second oval, I got that strange feeling something was watching us, and turned around to shine the torch. And it was there. It had walked to the other gate that led to the same area and was just standing there, watching us. I was still too far to make out from the body, and I was really scared, so I just started walking, and in 5 minutes, I was home. That was about a year ago. It took me about a month to work up the nerve to walk the dogs at night again. Last month, I was in the same place at the same time with my dogs. and I started thinking about the incident. As I was thinking, every dog in the surrounding neighborhood started barking like crazy. My two started whimpering like the first time, and all of a sudden, a giant bang sounded and something let out a large threatening howl which made all of the dogs suddenly stop. As soon as that happened, I grabbed the dogs and ran home. I'm convinced there's some sort of strange creature living there.
You are listening to the content of ParanormalM.com.